We began our study on a reproof from the Almighty in Job chapter 38 through Job 40 on Sunday night. Now, God moves to the sun. We've been talking about God is speaking to Job now. Job has wanted an audience with God. He had longed for God to speak to him. When God comes on the scene to talk to Job, he begins with his creation. And we looked at some of that on Sunday night. Now, tonight, as we pick up where we left off on Sunday night, we're going to look at God moves on to the sun, the greater light by day. In Job chapter 38, verse 16 through 19, God is speaking once again, have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you understood the expanse of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. Where is the way to the dwelling of light and darkness? Where is its place? Now, if you can only imagine, Job's gone through a tough time. I don't think there's anybody here tonight that could not say with great certainty that Job has had a tough go. Life has been tragic. Life has been difficult with all of the tragedies, the insurmountable grief that he and his wife have taken upon themselves, and then in the midst of it, for God to be silent for 36 chapters. God is totally silent, doesn't answer Job during those chapters. And then when he does come on the scene, he does not give Job any answers, but he begins to answer or to ask questions. Sunday evening, I mentioned to you that if you went and you did a search study in those chapters, you would find there are 77 questions that God poses to Job. And right here, in verse 16 through 19, I want us to look at those verses once again. Have you entered into the springs of the sea? Now think about the depth of the sea tonight. Or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you understood the expanse of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. Where is the way to the dwelling of light and darkness? Where is its place? Now that's quite a set of questions, wouldn't you agree? I mean, after all, God is God. After all, God is creator. God is overall. God is omnipotent. God is all powerful. God is omniscient. That means he's all-knowing. God is omnipresent. That means God is everywhere. And so you get quiet when you're asked these type of questions. You realize that you're in pretty deeply over your head. Now, in the world that you and I live in today, there are lots of problems. Would you agree with that tonight? People have problems everywhere. We sing that song, People Need the Lord, and they certainly do, because life is filled with problems. Life is filled with grief. Life is filled with sorrow and sadness. Life is filled with loneliness. Life is filled with anxiety and depression and isolationism. Life is filled with sickness and diseases. Life is filled with death. And life is filled with questions that we all would love to have answers to. And the questions continue, forcing Job here to realize just how many things are beyond his comprehension tonight. How many things that are beyond his comprehension. And God turns next and he does this questioning on the vast dimensions of his creative work. In chapter 38, verses 16 through 20, as we've just looked at. And he says, where is its place that you may take it to its territory and that you may discern the paths to its home? Now, he's asked that question. Research shows that the deepest place in all of the oceans that we are able to determine as of now, the depth is about 6.78 miles deep. About 6.78 miles deep. And the expanse out there of the stellar spaces, you may remember that it took one of our space probes 12 years just to cover 4.4 billion miles, ultimately passing within 3,000 miles of Neptune's cloud bank, but that represents space travel only in our immediate galaxy. It's really mind-boggling to think about it, that there are hundreds of thousands and maybe millions more out there that have never been plumbed nor ever will be. And while on the subject of space, notice what the Lord asked Job in chapter 38, verses 31 to 33. Can you bind the chains of Pleiades or loose the cords of Orion? Can you lead forth the constellation in its season and guide the bear with her satellites? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens, or fix their rule over the earth? Can you lift up your voice to the clouds so that an abundance of water may cover you? You see, when you consider the magnitude of God's creation, how incredibly vast and enormous it is, it certainly makes each one of us feel incredibly insignificant. And yet God knows you by name. God knows your days. As the 139th Psalm said, He fashioned your days before you ever were. If you and I can only understand how microscopic we really are compared to the telescopic vastness of outer space, and hear the one who created it and who can answer every question that we have is the one that is talking to Job. Not only did God create it all, He set it all in motion, and He keeps everything moving in clockwork precision. Did you realize tonight that if we were any closer to the sun, we'd all burn up? If we were any farther away, we would all freeze to death. God keeps everything moving in clockwork precision. And if that's not enough, then God introduces the next aspect to Job. It's the animal kingdom. He specifies both four-footed and winged creatures. It's like you're visiting a zoo. Notice in chapter 38, verse 39. And following. Can you hunt the prey for the lion, or satisfy the appetite of the young lions when they crouch in their dens and lie wait in their lair? Who prepares for the raven its nourishment when its young cry to God and wander about without food? Do you know the time the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the calving of the deer? Can you count the months they fulfill, or do you know the time they give birth? And then notice in chapter 39, verses 5 through 6, who sent out the wild donkey free, and who loosed the bonds of the swift donkey, to whom I gave the wilderness for a home and the salt land for his dwelling place. And then verse 9 and 10, will the wild ox consent to serve you, or will he spend the night at your manger? Can you bind the wild ox in a furrow with ropes, or will he harrow the valleys after you? And then verses 13 through 15, the ostrich's wings flap joyously with the pinion and the plumage of love. Notice what he says, for she abandons her eggs to the earth and warms them in the dust. And she forgets that a foot may crush them or that a wild beast may trample them. And then skipping down to verses 19 through 22, do you give the horse his might? Do you clothe his neck with the mane? Do you make him leap like the locust? His majestic snorting is terrible. He paws in the valley and rejoices in his strength. He goes out to meet the weapons. He laughs at fear and is not dismayed, and he does not turn back from the sword. And then skipping over to verses 26 through 30, is it by your understanding that the hawk soars, stretching its wings toward the south? Is it at your command that the eagle mounts up and makes his nest on high? On the cliff he dwells and lodges, upon the rocky crag, an inaccessible place. From there he spies out food, his eyes see it from afar. His young ones also suck up blood, and where the slain are, there is he. Maybe you, like myself, ask, what in the world? What in the world does a visit to outer space or a trip to the zoo here have to do with comforting Job when he's sitting in an ash heap with boils all over his skin? You see, all God needed to do was just go zap, and God could have taken it all away instantly and forever. They'd be gone. But guess what? God didn't do that. Author David Atkinson helps us to understand. This is what he says, why we need to ask. Why? We need to ask, does God spend all this time talking about the skies and the stars and the animals? Surely there's a more appropriate topic of conversation for someone who for some weeks has been going through an appalling sense of isolation. It is, of course, only when a depressed person has the safety and the reassurance of another's presence that conversation can happen. Now that Job knows he's not alone, it's appropriate for God to talk and perhaps to distract Job from his misery, certainly go give him new perspectives on this situation. It's as though the Lord God is taking a walk through his creation, a walk through the garden, perhaps as the storm becomes still, and is inviting Job to accompany him. Do you see this? Do you recognize that? It's as if God is taking Job on a journey. Let me amaze you, this writer goes on and says God, by the complexity and the intricacy of it all, from the foundation of the earth, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God in the heavenly court shouted for joy, that joyous celebration of the Creator has been sung ever since. Consider the sea, held back from its chaotic power, the skies, the deep, the light, and the darkness. Think of the animals too. Can you hunt prey for the lioness who provides for the ravens? What about the life-giving power of birth for the mountain goats, the wild asses, the wild oxen? Come round with me, Job. See these things, wonder at them, enjoy them. You cannot control them, but they are under my control, says God. And it's just as if God is taking Job on a journey through the various creations, some of the galaxies, some of the stars, the sea, the animal kingdom. You see, you are never what you thought till you get out of yourself and walk among that. And that perhaps is the reason God is taking him on this tour, to show him his majesty and his majestic works, and to take Job out of the equation for a minute, to maybe distract him for a little while from his incredible pain and misery, and to broaden the horizons of Job to his creative and life-giving majesty of the Almighty. And especially to help Job see in himself a new setting. Job this is where your heart will find rest. In finding your own place within the panorama of God's purposes for His world, can you lift your eyes from the ash heap and see the glory of God in His creation? You see, it seems that God is helping Job get beyond his immediate world of hurt. His ever-present counselors with their never-ending criticisms and false claims and accusations. And by doing this, God is preparing Job's heart, if you will, for a whole new understanding of his ways and for a willingness to forgive those men who have come to try to comfort him with their harsh words, and for the ability to recover and go on without bitterness or any other inner scars. You see, the ash heap where Job is sitting, maybe it's an appropriate place on which to sit while he's mourning, but it's certainly no place to stay if one wishes to be better. Sometimes we will most help distressed people draw near to God from their depths of depression, not by teaching them doctrine or by preaching our best sermons or by showing them the error of their ways, but by walking with them through the journey of the garden, the waterfall, or a sunset. Maybe by helping them recover and look at the world differently than they ever have. I've read down through the years, I remember one time in a grief class on a master's degree level, we were in a grief counseling class. I remember one lady that was dying from cancer had made a statement that after her diagnosis, she walked outside, the sun was shining, and she looked around and said, "I've never seen a more beautiful world." She began to look at life differently. She began to think about her situation, the graveness of the outlook of where things were going to be. She made the comment that she had really never stopped to really enjoy the beauty of the earth. We sing that old wonderful hymn. We haven't in a long time, but I love it. For the beauty of the earth, for the glory of the skies. I dare say that most of us are too busy in life to really enjoy God's wonderful creation, because the devil and his demons have us so distracted, plus the world and the flesh have us so distracted with other things that have crowded out the beauty of God's creation and just the breath of life that He's given to you and to me today. There's no guarantee of a tomorrow. And that's why Solomon said in Proverbs 27, verse 1, don't boast about tomorrow, because you don't know what tomorrow will bring. And as I alluded to a few weeks back, most of us never really enjoy the present because we're living in the past or we're living in the future. I want you to think about that tonight. Perhaps in all of this Hebrew poetry, going through this zoo and through the solar system, and as God, maybe He's just giving Job some moments to deflect from his own pain and suffering, to think about some other things. I think about whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are honest. Think on these things. Maybe, just maybe, because it was so much for Job to even begin to process, maybe it's just that God takes him through this garden of beauty, the depths of the ocean, the stellar spaces out there, to see some of His incredible creation. I really believe, I've read so much about so much anxiety that people are dealing with right now all over the world, not just here, all over the world, that I am assured if we took a poll of the world tonight, I'm confident of the fact that the majority of people would say, I'm either living in the past when I think it was a better time in life to live. We had things tough, but we had time for God and we had time for each other. I would say people are either living there or they're living in the future scared to death about what the future holds for them personally. And the present is being robbed. And I think this is just my take on what we've looked at thus far tonight, that perhaps God is looking at Job, and Job is reminiscing in his heart and his mind about his kids, his wealth, his character, his integrity of the East, all of his possessions, his servants, all of those things. Why wouldn't you think about those things? I mean, if you're human. Remember Sunday morning when I preached, when Paul said to the Romans, "O wretched man that I am, who is going to rescue me?" Even Paul himself, one of the greatest Christians that ever lived, who probably witnessed to more people than anybody, probably won more people to Jesus than anybody, certainly in his day and throughout the ages, because of the inspired writings of the Holy Spirit through his pen. If you can only imagine where people live today, they're wondering, what will be tomorrow? Have you been in the grocery store lately? Have you looked at empty shelves? I did not before last. I was aghast. Now, don't get excited. I don't cook. I bought a new stove 14 years ago. I've never had it on. I bought a dishwasher. It's been on twice. I have a microwave that's been on maybe 3 or 4 times. But I had to go to the grocery store. And while I was there, I just was stunned by the lack of stuff that is on the shelves. And then the very next day, I read a news article that said all over the world, the entire world, that 2/3 of the world's businesses cannot find people to work. And I thought, that's why the production is down. That's why you can't find what you need. But you know, tonight, if we took a poll all over the world, I'm sure people would be worried tomorrow. Is there going to be food? If they can't find workers, and if the production lines are down, if there are ships lined for miles in ports that cannot be unloaded, there are people trying to buy cars and they can't come in because of the chips that are not there. Do you see where I'm coming from? The anxiety, the depression, all of these things. The devil comes to steal. The Bible says to kill and to destroy. And I can assure you tonight, just maybe, God was trying to say, Job, I want to give you a few minutes of vacation just to walk with me through the created order, through the depths of the sea, through the animal kingdom out there, to let you know I'm still in charge. I'm still in control. We can enable depressed people to see themselves in a new setting and to recover a place of security and belonging within the rich panorama of God's creation. And I think that's maybe one of the things God's doing here with Job. He comes on the scene. God bursts on the scene. He doesn't answer Job's questions. But God has 77 other questions for Job. And Job doesn't know what to do with it. So let's look for a few minutes at Job's humble response. What was Job's response to all this? Job obviously got it. Look at Job 40, verse 3 through 5. Then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am insignificant. What can I reply to you? And then I want you to get this phrase. Job said, I lay my hand over my mouth. The next time you want to criticize God, think about what Job just said. Job realized in the expanse of creation, in the expanse of the heavenly bodies out there, that nobody in this present life would ever be able, it would be a teardrop in the ocean out there of what scientists could see. And when God gets through with that set of questions, Job said, behold, I'm insignificant. What can I reply to you? I lay my hand on my mouth. Let me tell you, Job said, once I've spoken, and I will not answer, even twice, and I will add no more. When you analyze Job's words, he had three responses. One of them was a response of humility. Job said, who am I? Job said, I'm insignificant. He realized how humble he was in the sight of an incredible, awesome God. The second thing he responds is his response of relief. Job realizes, I'm not in control of this. And thirdly, there's a response of surrender. And that's all that God really wanted to hear. In fact, Job's first response in verse 4, I am insignificant. Now, while Job had out-talked his friends in the presence of God, Job is just dumbfounded. Job's just dumb and confounded. And Job's second response when he says, what can I reply to you? That sounds like an expression of relief. God wasn't looking for any answers. He knows all of them. He wanted Job to acknowledge, I don't know any of the answers. And if I don't know about those things, as objective as they are, how could I ever fully understand the profound mysteries that surround my world? You see, by acknowledging that, there's relief that comes. And the point is this: when we're broken and we're brought to the end of ourselves, it's not for the purpose of gaining more answers, so we can spout those off to others. It's for our help to acknowledge that the Lord is God and His plans and His reasons are deeper, they're higher, they're broader than what our minds could ever comprehend. And so therefore we're relieved from having to give answers or to defend those answers we'd love to give. And Job's third response is a statement of surrender. He said, I put my hand on my mouth. And verse 4 concludes, I dare not say more, I've said enough, actually too much already. Now I'm going to stop there and apply what we've looked at tonight to Sunday night as we leap from Job's day to our day. And we'll talk about that on Sunday night. But when God finally steps into the scene, He questions Job. Job's questioned all the way through. Job wanted an audience with God. He wanted somebody to be his counselor, his advocate. And now God comes up with these 77 questions, and Job is dumbfounded. He absolutely realizes how microscopic he really is compared to the incredible creation of Almighty God. Now, while you and I will never understand why God didn't just touch and heal Job and all of those kinds of things, we haven't got to the end of the book yet. God will bring forth blessings beyond measure to Job. But for right now, God does not answer his questions. In fact, when we get to the end of the book, God still didn't answer Job's questions. Remember when the Apostle Paul had a thorn in the flesh? He had a problem in his life, a physical ailment. He prayed 3 times and God didn't take it away. Sometimes that happens, doesn't it? And a lot of people, when that happens, and they pray 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 and they pray, and they don't get the answer we want. Lots of people are mad at God. Lots of people are angry at God. Job, obviously, chapter 38, 39, and 40, Job is stopped dead in his tracks. And he realizes in God's sovereignty and God's providential care that God is over all. So tonight I'll leave you with this. Can the created tell the Creator what to do? Can the created tell the Creator how he can run his business, how he can run his universe? No wonder the psalmist said, he remembers my frame and he knows I'm dust.